Okay, welcome to Adobe InDesign. We're going to be working on this a little bit. The very first thing we're going to do is create a new document. So when we go here, this is the dialog window that's going to open up from coming down here on my dock and clicking in Design. You'll see different projects that have been worked on and things that are going on here. But what I want to do is create a new document. The intent of this is going to be for print. Now, you've got default or custom. Default just exactly what it's pre-programmed to do. The intent of this is print or web. That's going to be the basis of our colors. If I leave it at print, its color set is going to be CMYK or cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. If I turn it into web, it's going to be red, green, and blue. It's also going to deal with the resolution of the images. Now, I just want one page right now, and I'm not going to have facing pages, but I'll have a letter page right here. We'll just leave that. We won't worry about the columns or the margins yet. So I'm just going to hit OK. Alright, now I'm going to go to, starting in this, what I want to do is create some shapes and lines. I want to show you about using color and creating new color, and also how to import graphics. So let's start out by creating shapes. Down here are our shape tools. We've got a line right here, which will allow us to click and drag. Okay. Now currently we're not going to see anything because my fill color and stroke color is nothing, so I'm going to click on this, and then I'll go to my swatches, and I'm going to make that stroke registration. We'll make it cyan for right now. Let's see, should we do that? Yeah. There you go, or magenta. Alright, what that's done is that's created that shape. Now, with this, if I click on that, you're going to note that I've got this bounding box around it. This again denotes where it's centered based on what's going on right here. Over here in the top left hand corner, this is going to give us our plot, and we're measuring this by the center point. So this is measured in the center across, or our X scale is 4.125, and our Y, or going up and down, is 2.67. We can kind of see it right here. Now if I want to, I can type in, let's say 4 is my center point here, and 2 is my center point here, and that's going to default to inches. Now if I drag that over here, you'll see, drag a measurement over here, you'll see the center of that is at 4 inches, and the center here is at 2 inches. It's a lot faster and a lot more accurate to plot things out based on that than it is to kind of just guess and say, oh yeah, this looks like it's about right here or so. So it's just an easier way, and it's a lot faster. It also tells us our length, but you'll notice that it will allow us to change the size of this box, or change the size and angle of this line by moving these around. Okay, I'm going to get rid of these right here, these measurements or rulers. Now, at this point, I want to do a couple of other shapes. You'll recognize this pen tool. This is the bane of your existence from Illustrator and from Photoshop perhaps, but it's also a really valuable tool. I can come in here and I can create my shape and then give it any color that I want. In this case, I'm going to make my color on this red. It's my fill color. And I can make my stroke color yellow. Like that. Okay. I can come up here and I can increase the width, and this is my measurement palette across here. If I go to Window, you're going to actually your Control palette is what it's called. Okay. You can increase the size of that. You can come here and we can change our color and make it green. And now I'm also going to change the pattern with this, or the style, maybe the dots, and I'm going to make it larger so I can see those dots a little bit better. So that'll give us some variation. We can come in here and we can change our color as well, in our fill color by double clicking on that, or we can just come in here and click and say, oh, I want this one to be green as well. And so we've got this pattern. The great thing about this is with the black arrow we can select on it and move everything just like we do with Illustrator because it's vector based, or we can get the white arrow and we can click on an anchor point, oops, and go over an anchor point specifically and move that around. Now, this pen will also allow us to create rounded shapes. So if we click here, we can come around and make these, give ourselves, let's get a color in here, and increase this again a little bit so it's easier to see. I can come here, and by clicking and dragging, I can create that irregular shape, and I can finish it up, where I started, like that, just like in Illustrator. Okay, and then grab the individual anchor points. I can move the handles around to adjust them and make them get it to look the way I want it to. So many of the things that we do in Illustrator we can do in InDesign. It's just not quite as flexible in InDesign. It's not quite as intuitive. You have to learn a little bit more and get a little more used to it. So that's a side note. Now, the shapes that you're going to use primarily in InDesign, because it is a publication format or program, will be these rectangular and ellipse and polygon shapes. For example, I'm going to click here and drag, and that's going to create my rectangle, or in this case, a square. Okay. Now, as I create that square, I can click and drag and enlarge it and make it smaller. I can see the overall width right here. Let's see, and the height right here. So right now it's 2.7 by 2 inches high. I can change this to 4 inches by 5 inches if I choose. Now, it's going to plot it all based on this center point. If I move this now, it moves where it's located, because it moves the reference point. It doesn't move the actual box. It just moves the reference point for it. And so that's part of what we're seeing. I can move this around, and you'll see that those reference points are changing. Okay? I can change this, and so on. Move all those things around so I can base it. So if I know that I want this to measure at exactly 1 inch from each corner, I can come up here and double click on this so that it gets my zeros or my plotting lines, 0 here and 0 here. I can come to this top left corner, and I can type 1 inch and 1 inch right here. And now I'm exactly 1 inch from the left side, 1 inch from the top. If I want it centered on the page, then I'll click the center reference point, and the center of an 8.5 by 11 inch page across is 4.25, and down is 5.5. I enter, and now that object is perfectly centered within that box. Okay. Now, with this, we can add all sorts of different colors. There's kind of a limited palette in InDesign. It's not like Photoshop, and we can adjust the tint of it right here, making it lighter or darker in that individual thing. We can also duplicate a color, and then come in. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to change this and make it just a little bit lighter. So I'm going to make this 50% magenta. Now that color is always 50% magenta. It's not a tint anymore. It's going to always be that 50% magenta. I can create a lot of different colors. You'll see each of these have those 4 little sections, CMYK. That means it's all printable. Remember, this is the print spectrum of colors that we did specifically when we identified in starting the application that it was going to be for print. Well, I want to create a new color, and I can come up here to the pop-up menu to make a new color, a new tint, or a new gradient, any of those things. Or I can come here and just click on this, and it's going to duplicate a color. I can just double-click on that, and I can make whatever color I want. Now, it starts out by giving you the swatch name in its color values as far as CMYK. I'm going to change that. I'm going to change this to blood red. And then my color type is process, which means when it prints, it's going to separate out into 4-color process, or it's going to print out appropriate for CMYK. We'll talk about that another time, I think. Here's my color mode. Now I'll come in here, and I'm going to give it a lot of magenta, a lot of yellow, and a little bit of cyan just to deepen that up, and maybe even a little bit of black. And I'll hit OK. And now we see blood red. Now this is a process color. If I want to, I can create a spot color as well, either by coming up here again to New Color Swatch, or by I can simply click right here. I'm going to double click on that color. And I'm going to call this phlegm green. Okay. That phlegm green I'm going to change from process to spot. Now what that means is instead of separating out into little dot patterns like you see in the color comics in the Sunday newspaper, if you look at those, you're going to see little dots that create color. What it's going to do is it's going to give you a specific color, like a Pantone color. If you've seen a t-shirt that's printed and it has just a solid swatch of a color, this is how it's establishing it, by a spot. And so I can go in here now and I can say, all right, this green is going to be phlegm green. I want to make a little bit, maybe a little more of that in there. Just about like that. Okay. I'll line it up a little bit, maybe add a little more yellow, just so it'll look a little nicer. Not that phlegm green can look that much nicer, but we'll change that to that color. Now that's a spot color, and I'll hit OK. What that means is when it prints out now, if it prints out registrations or different separations of color, it's going to print out cyan dots, magenta dots, yellow dots, black dots, and then it's going to print out a whole nother plate with phlegm green. If you've seen prints that have a metallic coating on them, or have a gloss coating that's in a pattern, or have maybe a fluorescent coating, none of those are colors that can be accomplished through CMYK. And so this is how they're creating it. They're coming up here, they're creating a new color swatch. We're going to call this metallic gold. Make it a spot color. Now, we can't get a metallic gold in here, so what I'm going to do is just create sort of a semblance of gold, or something that's going to kind of look like gold, and I'll hit OK. And I've got a spot color. And then now anything that I put in that color, or with that color, is going to separate out and become its own pattern or its own color. So these are ways that I can create colors, and I can create as many as I want. I can also come in here and go to, for example, I'm going to make a new color swatch. I might, instead of going color mode, I may go down here to Pantone, like this. And what these are a series of pre-mixed colors, like going to Home Depot and grabbing a swatch of color that you want in your house. And you're saying, I want this color, and they're going to mix it for you. Well, that's the same with the printer. You're going to specify, I want for this logo it to be Pantone 282. So you're going to type in 282, or you're going to find a specific color. 485 is a true red, so we'll do 485. You're going to specify one of those colors, or you can just slide through until you find a color that feels comfortable for you and hit OK. And then you get a spot color that way. So those are a couple of ways that you can establish color. All right. Now, let's go ahead and talk about placing images. Placing images is going to be important because that's really what happens in InDesign. InDesign is sort of this recipe where you're plugging different things in from different sources. You're going to plug in images from Photoshop or graphics from Illustrator, different things like that in order to create this ultimate page that you have. And so we'll start working on that and show how to get those pictures in.